Okay, everybody stop. Close your eyes. I want you to imagine the greatest sports game that you have ever witnessed. Are we all thinking of the same thing? Okay, open your eyes. It's another edition of Southwest Bias.
Get that stuff out of here. It's Southwest Bias.
As always, brought to you by Desert Financial Credit Union, Arizona's #1 credit union, named by Forbes. I am Erik Ruby. I'm here with Derek Montilla, making his return to the new Southwest Bias. And of course, I've got Anthony Totri on my right. Gentlemen, PHNX, we put out the top 25 games in Arizona sports history. And #1 was a very clear choice.
Correct.
And so we're going to talk about is Game 7 of the 2001 World Series, the greatest game ever played in sports history. But first, we have some things that need to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totri, we're on the ASU show every day of the week, 1:30 right here on PHNX Sports. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And there is one game for ASU football that lives in the history books. And that game is...
That is when Arizona State shut out Nebraska, that hadn't lost a game in, I believe, 3 seasons. The #1 team in Nebraska at Sun Devil Stadium, and won the game. Upset #1 Nebraska in a shutout. I believe the only other time, it's only happened maybe one other time, where an unranked opponent shut out a #1 and won the game.
And it's one of those moments that, and Derek, I know that you went to ASU, and obviously you know all the big sporting events in the Valley. That was a moment.
Oh God,
that was an absolute moment for everything.
And it's funny because when I think of like my own personal life path, I mean, watching ASU go out there when I was like a freshman in high school and do that, that's significant. It's significant to me to, you know, have that pride in that school and want to attend there. And it's why that stuff's so important, right? Like, I mean, when you get a chance to see memorable games like that, you become a fan of that school, especially if you're local and sometimes, you know, beyond that. But
core memories, right?
Yeah. But plus, I mean, you know, obviously back in the day, it's huge for recruiting. Now, you know, the NIL deals make things a little different, right? But I mean, back then you had to use everything you could get. So beating a team that was on a 26-game winning streak in college football is incredible.
And
but
you don't
shutting
see
them
that
out,
now.
You know?
Yeah, you don't see 26-game win streaks now. You don't see unranked opponents beating #1s. Like, can you imagine if Arizona State pulled that off last year?
If you shut out Georgia,
or if you shut out Michigan,
yeah.
If you shut out anybody in the top 10, shutting out period a team in the top 25,
let alone a team on a 26-game win streak.
And that game in itself propelled ASU to have a wildly successful season after that as well. But on the top 25 games, and listen, we here at PHNX Sports, we know what we're doing, but this specifically, this got me a little upset. Out of the top 25 games in Arizona sports history, they have this ranked 19th.
No.
Which is, I don't know, do you say lower or higher in these? It's like higher than, but not lower on the list. I always get so messed up when I do the ranks.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I guess it should be ranked higher is what I would say. Like,
right.
Yeah, that's
but the number is high. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a lower number, right.
So ahead of it in the list is Cardinals clinching the first playoff berth. Do you remember where you were when that happened?
God, yes. I absolutely. I was.
Would you say that's a bigger moment?
Yes, I think because here's the difference. Here's why.
Is it because they beat the Chargers?
No, it has nothing to do with the Chargers.
It absolutely has everything to do with beating the Chargers. But I will say, like, the big problem with that is the fact that this game, there's 2 things to it. I mean, playoff implications and doing things like that are always going to be part of, you know, of obviously a big game, right? And like that's what happens there with the Cardinals. You also have the fact that, you know, this game, as great as it was to witness, especially to be a Sun Devil fan, especially to be a Sun Devil, it was still a 19-0 shutout. So typically, when you think of a great game, you think of something coming down to the wire. You think of something coming close. Okay. And maybe that's the reason why it doesn't get the respect that it deserves. Not the size of the win, because this was a huge win for the school and one of the biggest, in school history, right?
So this is where something kind of inside me gets stirred with this list. I love a good back and forth game, right?
There are losses on this list.
That's the big thing. There are losses. And ranked higher is the 1996 Rose Bowl. Not just ranked higher, but ranked 7 spots higher, where ASU lost to Ohio State 20-17. Now, you can argue on the field that was a better more evenly matched up game for sure. But at the same time, and above it as well, listen, I love the Suns. I love Devin Booker. But his 70-point game where they lost by 10 points against the Boston Celtics, if we're ranking individual performances in Arizona sports history, that's up there. But if we're ranking games, there's no world where a loss in any sense or fashion, even if it's more exciting, is a better game in Arizona sports history than shutting out not just the number one team in the country, but truly one of the greatest teams and one of the greatest runs by a team ever in college sports, period.
You know what belongs, honestly, ahead of D-Book's 70-point loss? That's not even on the list.
What?
Is Kalen Ballage's 7-touchdown game to
That
beat
wasn't
Texas
crazy.
Tech and
That wasn't
Patrick Mahomes,
crazy.
but that's not on the list.
That was crazy.
Right? And they
Yeah.
won that game. The Suns got blown out in that game. And I don't think it's a matter of, oh, this ASU win should be higher than this ASU loss in the Rose Bowl, right? Like, I don't think that matters. I think when we're talking about the greatest games, and we're doing it from an Arizona perspective, right? Looking at that win that Arizona State had against Nebraska. Nebraska was the team at that point in time in college athletics. So I get it wasn't a back and forth game, but that for me almost makes it that much better because you watched a team that nobody thought was going to do that.
Right.
They did it at home and they absolutely abused. They abused the number one team in the nation. It was a coaching masterclass. You look at some of the legends that were on that Arizona State team that are still people talk about as the greatest Sun Devils of all time. And you said it right there, right? Like this game was how long ago, and you remember exactly what was going on at that point in time.
Oh, hell yeah.
Like it just belongs higher on the list. There shouldn't be a loss
and
there.
it's also one of those rare instances where the fact that it was a blowout makes it such a great game, right? Like a lot of times you wouldn't say that, but when the underdog goes out there and blows out the team that was on a 26-game winning streak, yes, you absolutely should, give that credit for what it is. And I agree, like losses on this.
There's a blowout loss that's higher on the list.
That's
crazy.
That guy
That's
out of
tough.
where
And
it's
again,
at.
if you're ranking individual performances, it's a completely different conversation
That's fair.
here. So I think we're all on a similar page. I think there's some slight disrespect there. I wouldn't put that game
Serious disrespect.
below any losses or anything like that. Still ranked as one of the 20 best games in Arizona sports history. If you agree with us on the ASU or you disagree, make sure you comment down below. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to PHNX Sports. We are almost at 30,000 subscribers. And if you're here right now, you can be the 30,000 subscriber.
Did they get
should-
anything
they
if
should
they get
win
30,000?
something,
We really should. Maybe we'll give away something for 35K.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get there, but 30K, we're almost there. And before we get to what might not just be the greatest game in Arizona sports history, but the greatest game of all time, I want to remind you guys about the greatest place for you to keep your money. And that is Desert Financial Credit Union. And I can say that because not only me, not only my parents, but my grandparents have been using Desert Financial Credit Union back when the name was Desert Schools and it was just for educators, which my grandmother was. Her account number, Derek, started with a 1.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's
That's
a
a
lot.
lifer.
I also got my home mortgage, my first home mortgage through Desert Financial back when it was called Desert Schools.
So they've been taking care of your family.
Long time.
Been
Very,
taking
very
care
long
of my
time.
family.
Yeah.
I know Anthony Totri's being taken care of by Desert Financial Credit
yeah.
Union as well. And they want to take care of you and give you $200 for free. All you have to do is open up a free checking account online. Do desertfinancial.com/200. You get $200 slid right into your bank account. And plus you get some fun cards that you can spend as well. You can use the Arizona State University Visa debit card. They've got Cardinals. And of course, they've got your desert landscapes. Highly recommend our wonderful friends over at Desert Financial Credit Union. But speaking of wonderful, when I closed my eyes, and the thing is, I wasn't actually sentient at the time that this game happened. But my parents were at this game. I heard stories about this game. I went back and watched this game, and you feel like you're in the moment when you talk about Game 7 of the 2001 World Series. The Arizona Diamondbacks shock the world, defeating the New York Yankees 3-2. Obviously, Derek, you are our Diamondbacks host.
Wait, you
What-
are?
Yeah.
I do a show sometimes.
So there are
about-
other
man.
shows besides the ASU
That's
show. just so
crazy,
you
man.
know.
Good for you.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you.
What was it like in that moment?
Well, it's hard to describe because we're Arizona sports fans, right? And we haven't had anything good in our lives at times. We haven't had anything positive happen to us. And I think that the biggest thing that I remember about that moment was how over it was. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we
Right.
all had that moment where it was like,
It's so over. We're
it's
so
so
back.
over.
right? You know, this was
We're so back.
This was a series where the Diamondbacks had a lead and honestly blew games, right? And that's something that we've become accustomed to seeing of this franchise throughout the year is having that lead and then losing it late in a heartbreaking fashion. I think that everything was set to be this storybook ending for the New York Yankees. The way that they came back, the way the Diamondbacks just thumped them early, and it seemed unstoppable. But once you got past Randy Johnson, once you got past Curt Schilling, you found that they were beatable, and they did that.
Yeah.
And man, I'll tell you, it was a feeling of that dread of seeing your team, come so close. And there's similar feelings to the Diamondbacks World Series run from last year because there was just kind of a sense of satisfaction that your young team had come so far. Not that it was young by the guys on the team.
No, but quite
I mean,
literally a franchise was in its very early years of existing.
So it did feel good to just, come that far, but to be so close and to watch it slip away like it did, it was heartbreaking. And you didn't imagine that it was going to end the way it did. This is Mariano Rivera. He led all of Major League Baseball that year with 50 saves. He was unstoppable. He was the Iceman coming out, right? And he just came out, that year and dominated. And again, you felt like once they got to him, it was a foregone conclusion, right? And I mean, we know closers like that now in Major League Baseball where that's kind of what happens, right? Like when they come out, it's a wrap. And this was that ultimate case. You almost started packing your stuff up at the bottom of the ninth, and you're like, oh, they got a hit. It's got kind of cool, and then it's getting exciting, and then you almost feel like, don't get my hopes up, don't do this.
That's
to
the
me.
worst.
Yeah, and I mean, when Luis Gonzalez hit that ball and it landed, it's like tears, wet weeping, before they were even in, and it was just that moment of being just that shock that we did it, just that ultimate in that moment, you overcame the odds of one of the greatest teams in Major League Baseball history. You overcame one of the greatest closers in Major League Baseball history. And you kind of overcame a moment where, as a baseball team, I feel like it was almost hard, right? The Yankees had gone through what New York had gone through that year. Yeah. And it kind of felt like it's hard not to kind of feel like the villain a little bit.
It was kind of back against the wall. Everybody's rooting for the Yankees. Not because they hate the Diamondbacks.
Right.
But because, like you said,
it was just the story.
Yeah. The story of everything. Yeah. And not just the story of everything outside of the game, and not just the fact that Gonzo hit that walk-off and cementing himself in the history of the state forever, but it's everything that happened before that as well. Yeah. You have Curt Schilling and Randy Johnson, Johnson closing on 1 day's rest, the co-MVPs of the World Series. You have, again, like you said, the greatest closer.
That was such a legendary moment too.
Right?
Because that's some stuff that you just, even at as a baseball analyst, you understand why a team would never do that except in that kind of moment, right? But it's a dream moment as a fan that you never think you're going to see. I'd love to see our best pitcher right now come out of the bullpen and try to just give us 1 inning, and it's holy shit, it's happening. That's actually happening.
And then it ends up working as well, and then the offense comes in, and again, you're down. You're trailing 2-1, and you're facing the Iceman. And you have just a series of events, a single from Mark Grace, a sacrifice bunt from Damian Miller, getting the tying run in scoring position. Jay Bell forced a pinch runner out at third. And then Womack, of course, ties the game at 2-2. Everybody's going crazy. But like you said, Derek, you almost have this feeling as a Valley sports fan where you're like, there's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way that this is going to happen right now. Mm-hmm. And then it's just that bloop. And it's the bloop that changed the history.
It really is a bloop.
It really was a bloop.
It's the bloop that changed the history of this franchise forever. And almost now, so many years later, seeing the Diamondbacks in the World Series and coming close and falling short, you realize what could have been back then, Totri, where it's you say football's a game of inches, but you're literally inches away from completely rewriting the history of this franchise, of sports in this state, and even just sports, period. Because I don't know what your take is on this, but if this is not the greatest sports game of all time, it's at least up there.
I think it's definitely up there. And again, if you're an Arizona Diamondbacks fan watching that game, your game's tied, you're just don't let it get to extras. You're you can't let this continue on, because again, it's the story element to the whole thing, right? Whether it's real or not, you kind of lean into it of this is this is the Yankees.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is their moment. This is their time to shine. And like you said, Gonzo does what he does, and he brings the state of Arizona probably the greatest moment in Arizona sports history, hands down.
Absolutely. And it was his greatest season ever too. I mean, that was the season he hit 57 home runs. He had 142 RBI. He slashed 325, 429, 688 with a 1.117 OPS. Like the man was incredible. And it's just kind of hilarious that with all of that power he had all season long, the most important hit that he had is a bloop single.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
You know, it's baseball.
Let's try to take a step back here and let's try to unpack maybe some of the competitors for greatest game in sports history. Are there any baseball games, Derek, that come to mind that you say, you know what, that moment was at least close?
Yeah, the Aaron Boone game is probably one of those games.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only been 2, I think, walk-off home runs in Major League history. So, I mean, I think that was probably one of them. There's just some crazy stuff that happened between the Red Sox and the Yankees there. And, there was some huge comebacks. I think baseball is one of those games that typically you don't see it. And that's why this game was as good as it is. You don't see all of those, 7 games come down to one moment where 2 teams are separated by one run like that. And that's what cements it as such a huge game. Like
how unlikely it is. It doesn't just have to happen once. Right. You have to get into game 7 period. I mentioned that my parents were there. They were season ticket splitters with a bunch of people that they knew.
Yeah.
And they did a drawing for who gets to go to what game. And they drew, I think it was like game 3 and they drew game 7. Oof. And they were pissed. Mm-hmm. They were so mad because they were like, you're not even guaranteed a game 7. Obviously, hindsight 2020, you end up being able to go to maybe the greatest sporting event of all time. They said their ears were ringing for like a week afterwards with how loud it was in there. So the 6 games before that, well, it doesn't necessarily, always add up to this moment. It's the context that makes it greater as well. But maybe outside of baseball, Totri, football, basketball, is there another sporting event that you're like, that's etched in my brain as one of the greatest I've ever watched?
Yeah, and I think it's tough for baseball to be in this argument for best game when it comes to the postseason, and it's an unfair argument. But because it's a series, I think it does make it a little bit more challenging to be like, this is the moment. However, when it is a game 7,
it is a moment,
it is a one-on-one thing. I think for me, especially when you're talking greatest game ever, a moment that like defines sports. I think back to the 2006 like national championship, USC, Texas.
Yeah.
You've got Vince Young. You've got a team in USC that's trying to go for a three-peat. One team's won 19 straight games. One team's won 34 straight games. Yeah. Like it's been building to these 2 juggernauts all season long, and it delivers, right? You have a game that is a 1-possession game, goes down to the wire. It is the high scoring. You've got a team in the 40s, a team in the high 30s. And that's just like when you think of college football, that's the game, right? And it doesn't even matter what occurred after the fact with those NFL careers, whether you're talking of Vince Young, talking of Reggie Bush, like it doesn't matter. Like it's just, that's college football. Like if anyone asks you what's college football, you don't know what it is. You just show them the highlights of that game. You're like, this is college football. It's Vince Young doing things that he couldn't do in the NFL. Yeah. It's this guy, Reggie Bush, that is walking on air. Like that's college football.
I think when you even have those games where even if it was a playoff game and the team went on to lose, you still have games that, like you said, are etched in your mind forever. I was telling you guys before we started, Reggie Miller, the choke sign game, right? Scoring 24 points, 25 points in the fourth quarter, and most of those in the last minute. I, as a kid, had never seen anything like that. And I was so into basketball at that time that it's crazy how one basketball game like that can literally make you a fan of a guy.
Right.
And also just make you love that sport.
Yeah.
Like to see something like that, as crazy as it is, as unlikely as it is, those moments make you always believe in your team. That your team, even when we're down by 10.
Even if they never come again.
Yeah, even if it never comes again. Like, I believe it can happen because I've seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes.
I remember talking myself into similar situations where I'm like, I was talking to my dad. I was like, this could happen. He's like, man, that's not going to happen.
But I've seen it.
It could. And so a couple of the games that I want to explore are ones that have maybe the same amount of pressure and stuff on the line, like a Game 7, a World Series. Talk about the 2016 national title game. in men's basketball.
Yeah.
Villanova, North Carolina. Right? I mean, you have Marcus Page hitting a double clutch 3 to tie the game 74-74. And Chris Jenkins comes down the court, hits a 3, nails it. Villanova beats North Carolina 77-74. Possibly the greatest shot.
Was that not in Arizona too?
I believe it was in Arizona. Funny enough, I was actually at opening day for the Diamondbacks. I believe
Wow.
Greinke was on the mound for the first time,
Wow.
and we were really excited. And I don't think he had a good game. And then I end up checking my phone, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I missed the national championship game." That game, absolutely. And then if you want to talk another game 7, something that has context and all before it, being down 3-1, Cleveland Cavaliers against the Golden State Warriors in 2016. You have iconic calls, the blocked by James. You have iconic shots, and you have Kevin Love locking up Steph Curry and everything like that. I would say if I had to put one other game on that same level, and I know that you can kind of be like, hey, the series beforehand maybe takes away the importance. I would say Game 7 of 2016 NBA Finals, because of the historic 3-1 comeback, what it did for LeBron's legacy, and even the impact that it had on sports beyond that, you could argue is greater than what the Diamondbacks did. And that game in itself was also a fantastic game that came down to the wire in the Game 7 championship on the line. I know before the show you mentioned the kick 6.
Yeah.
Talk about just completely improbable victories.
That's one of the greatest
those calls that
Yeah.
get etched into your mind. Absolutely. And so, I mean, Jacob, you're doing the arm movement. Come on, man. Tell us one that you think.
Gibby rounding the bases, like hobbled around, pumping his fist after he hits the grand slam. I mean, that's iconic for sure.
Of all people to hit the grand slam, Kirk Gibson.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think
it's a Dodger highlight, though. We don't. Need to talk about that.
We're gonna put that off to the side there a little bit. I think that for me, inarguably, Game 7 of the World Series, no matter how you spin it, in 2001, it is a top 5 game of all time. So much context goes into it. So much like theatrics as well, and the payoff for a small franchise in one of their early years of existing, coming in Game 7 against a juggernaut team with the entire country behind them, to be down against just an ice cold closer, one of the greatest the game's ever seen, and to come back and win that game. There's really nothing like it. But is there a game that comes to your mind about maybe dethroning that as the greatest game in all time?
Not going to happen.
You might not. Maybe you have some competition, though. Let us know down in the comments. You can also subscribe to this channel. Like we mentioned, we're almost at 30K subs. We appreciate all of you watching this right now. But if you're here and you're not subscribed, I'm a little conflicted. It's like, I love you, but also, what are you doing? Like, come on now.
How did you even find us?
Yeah. You can at least, if you're not going to do the free thing and, subscribe to the channel, you can at least do the other free thing, and you can like this video. Derek, where can the people find you on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, I'm always on Twitter. I'm at Cap_caveman with a K. You can also find me on the PHNX Diamondback show.
What time does that go? I mean, we have post games and stuff, but on a normal day,
1 p.m. usually, and then post game shows. Most days post game shows.
Most day post game shows. Totri, I mean, I know where to find you, but where can the people find you?
PHNX Sun Devils 1:30 every single day during the week. Got fall camp kicking off next week. So
exciting.
Getting ready for the college football season. Be there at 1:30 every day.
You can also follow him on Twitter at Anthony_Totri. You can find me on that PHNX Sun Devil show. You can also catch me producing our Sun show every single day at 3 p.m. And you can follow me on Twitter at Erik Ruby. That's Erik with a K. Guys, this is a wonderful.
Stop patting yourself on the back.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I went last at least.
Man of many talents.
I went last at least, right? All right, guys. That was another very fun edition of Southwest Bias. We're going to see you guys next week.
Get that stuff out of here. It's Southwest Bias.